Welcome back to Impact Show. I'm really stoked to have all of you watching this. Our subscribers are growing really fast. Our last video we did with Peter Thiel and Alex Epstein on fossil future. Man, we launched it, 10,000 views day one, and it's been growing by 2,000 or 3,000 a day. We've got over 75 comments, and it's that kind of impact that I like to cover. These are amazing people in my network doing epic things, and it's important to break the stories and to break that thought leadership and knowledge in front of you, hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs, to learn little pieces and little bits and nuggets about changing the world and actually offering impact in your life and your industry. As you know, we're hosting the world's largest virtual conference in Deer Valley, Utah on October 7th through 9th. Impact 22, I invite you to tune in. We've got some huge names already locked. Marriott International just stepped up as a sponsor, and we've got over 100 others. So be sure to check out our website, impact22.live. I'm here today with Robert Grant, a great friend. I've known this guy for a while. He's doing some epic things. And Robert, obviously you and I have a friendship. We do business together. I've known you for a number of years here in Orange County.
We won't date ourselves.
No, we won't. At least you look young. Tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us how you got into what you do, where you came from, and your journey from youth to adulthood.
Wow, that's not a very easy question to answer. I'll start off with, I spent most of my career in healthcare. And I used to be president of Allergan Medical, so I launched products and commercialized major products in the consumer healthcare space like Botox and Juvederm and Lap-Band and Latisse. And then I went on to Bausch & Lomb, and that's when I met you.
That's right.
And I was CEO of Bausch & Lomb Surgical, and the surgical business of Bausch & Lomb is a global enterprise that has many different products, but one of the most significant in that portfolio is intraocular lens technology.
Right.
And so I spent a few years as CEO of that business. Then I started my own group of companies in 2012.
Right.
And under a banner called Strathspey Crown. And now we have 17 companies in that portfolio. We did a very large crowd financing, which was in total about $250 million. Wow. And then we built and created companies out of that, some of which are now publicly traded, which is very exciting. One of them is called Evolus. They're here in Orange County, in Newport Beach. And it competes in the neurotoxin space, so it's also in the same healthcare vein. But we also expanded and diversified into clean energy, fintech, where one of our companies, Alphaeon Credit, is the second largest healthcare lender in the United States right now. And we also went into cryptography. So we went into cryptography of a company called Theon and another company called Crown Sterling, which is a blockchain cryptocurrency technology that delivers as a wrapper encryption and compression technology.
Wow, so very diversified entrepreneur. And to my audience, I want to just make it really clear. He started with Allergan, and now he has his own holding company of boutique companies that he owns, some of which may be publicly traded or a startup. And this is all about leadership. You don't necessarily just have to work for a company. You can evolve that leadership into your own brand, just like I do with my agency and the different companies. And so, Robert, tell us a little bit about how you got into medical device or ophthalmology and work at Allergan and Bausch & Lomb. Like, what led you into that vertical?
Yeah, I was always intrigued by the idea of sort of human potential. And especially also concepts like improving vision, improving quality of life, extending our lives. We're all living much longer lives now, right? Probably I saw in Time magazine about 7 or 8 years ago that the first person to live to 150 years old was born about 7 or 8 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And this is where they're projecting forward. That's how much our lives are extending out. So as we live those longer lives, I was fascinated by the idea of how do we make sure that we don't end up like so many people do, unfortunately, today, in nursing homes where you have a very low quality of life. How can we extend that quality of life so that we're not spending half of the years we're alive in incapacitated states? And so I was very interested in, from a healthcare perspective, what that could mean from a lifestyle standpoint. So I kind of played in that lifestyle healthcare category. And I started out in laser technologies. I worked for a company called Coherent earlier in my career. I lived in 9 different countries, running foreign subsidiaries for some of these larger companies. And then I kind of used all that experience and brought it into becoming an entrepreneur. And I'd actually started out my career in the very beginning as an entrepreneur, but I sold a company and I thought, was I just lucky?
Right.
Or, could I find my backside with both hands or not, right? So I was like, not sure. So I thought, well, maybe I should go work for some larger companies just to see what it's like. And I noticed that there's a real major difference between different stages of companies' growth. The leader that is appropriate for a company at its earliest stage is not necessarily the leader that's appropriate for a company as it grows beyond a certain level. We call this the Peter Principle in MBA school. But I think that I was very intrigued by all of that, and I took these experience of working with small companies and larger companies, mid-sized companies, to then apply it to this portfolio that I now manage today.
Well, you make it look easy, but at the root of an entrepreneur like you, what was that tipping point, and how young were you where that you're like, I know I want to be my own boss. I know I want to be an entrepreneur. Even working at a big Allergan or Bosch, you were still the leader. Tell us, what was that root? What was that compelling tipping point in your life? Where did that come from?
For me, I guess I got started when I was in the stage still when I didn't know what I didn't know.
Right.
And we've all been there, right? Yeah. We've all been in this place where it's like, what's the limit of my knowledge?
Right.
And so as I kind of wanted to explore the boundary of my knowledge and then the beginning of entropy to me, right, that which I don't know, my ignorance, I decided, at some stage I'm going to have to just sort of jump into it, take a risk. And I didn't know any better. When people would tell me, they're like, oh, you can't do that. That can't be done. I'd be like, but why? And I would constantly push that boundary of why. It's like the little kid that asks like 6 questions of why. My daughter does that to me. It's, but why, Daddy? But why? But why? After like 6 times, I used to just answer and say, because, right? And that's sort of the answer of things. I never had a because. So for me, I just decided to keep pushing the boundary because I didn't know what I didn't know. And maybe none of us know what we don't know. So therefore, there were many times that I failed and many times that I had breakout success because maybe I didn't know any better or I'd never considered the thought that I might just fail.
And you mentioned 9 different countries. So tell me a little bit about that, because I believe that cultural diversity really gives perspective to entrepreneurs as you go through the challenges of running an enterprise. Can you tell us a little bit about your cultural heritage, where you went to school, some of the countries you grew up, the languages that you speak?
Well, I didn't learn another language until I was 19 years old. I'm 1/3 Asian, and so I always grew up a little bit different than probably a lot of the other kids, but now it's pretty normal, right? Everyone is pretty mixed in some way, shape, or form. But for me, I was fascinated by other people, and I always saw meeting other people as another opportunity to learn more in life and push the boundary condition out of what I didn't know. And so in order to do that, I'd go to countries that I didn't speak the language. So how can I take advantage of this opportunity to learn from other people if I don't understand their language, because I can't even communicate with them? So the first other language that I learned was Korean. So I learned the Korean language. I had no background in it whatsoever. And I lived in Korea for 2 years when I was 19 years old until 21. And when I got back from that, I was fascinated by everything Korea, everything Asia. So then I decided, well, it's not that hard to learn Japanese from Korean, so I might as well learn Japanese too, because it's actually quite similar. The funny part is that when I first started speaking Japanese, when I lived in Japan, they'd say, you have Korean accent. Wow. It was pretty funny. But I kept learning, I just kept pushing through. And I think that's been sort of a theme of my entire life. Then I moved to Australia and I had to learn Australian as well. And that is another language, by the way. I can actually say sentences that you would not understand at all if I speak true Australian, but I don't count that in the languages that I speak. Then I moved to Hong Kong. So I lived in Hong Kong for about a year. Then I went to MBA school and I did a study abroad in France and Switzerland. So then I ended up, after MBA school, moving to Germany for 3 years. Now, I'd grown up in the UK also. So I had this very diverse experience of living in all these different countries, learning the language. And I think what that really does is it helps us expand the number of perspectives that we're able to comprehend.
I couldn't agree more. And growing up as a child, my family's from Turkey. They would take me to Europe every summer.
Yeah.
And even as a young boy, it was a challenge sometimes because I was so acclimated to the United States, to McDonald's, to all these great lifestyle opportunities that we had here, and when I faced the challenges of some of the countries I visited, it sure gave me perspective. And I think you're right on the money as far as seeing the different cultural aspects and the different languages and the different bottles of water and the different things that exist in other countries gives you perspective as a leader. If any of you that's watching the show have an opportunity to travel, in fact, I always tell my employees when I hire them, one of the things I want to make sure you do is travel. Save up your money, find an opportunity to go to another country, experience those things, because it will give your life more perspective. We get one opportunity at life to see and do as much as possible, and I really believe that cultural diversity gives so much perspective to the modern entrepreneur. I always know right away when I'm talking to somebody if they've really traveled the world and lived in different countries. And whether you have the financial resources or not, there's always a way to get across a border and to see and experience these things. And so cultural, we talked a little bit about your education. Let's go into a little bit about the businesses that you're overseeing right now. And I want the crown jewel moment of Cyber, your latest project, which I'm very involved with. I cannot wait to release this to the audience because it is something that is not just revolutionary, but it is going to help and change lives, but it's also going to potentially change marketing mediums, which is something that I'm very vested into. Tell us a little bit about that cultural perspective, entrepreneurship, and your current businesses now and what those businesses do.
Sure. So I kind of looked at it. I'll start off with a story. I got the opportunity to spend about a 2-week period of time on Richard Branson's island, right? And first in 2010 and the second time was in 2015. And when I first went there, I was fascinated by Richard's work because here's another phenomenal entrepreneur that did things so differently. So I wanted to understand why he chose the path that he chose. So I asked him the question, like, how do you choose which companies to go into, which industries to sort of target? And he said to me something very interesting. He said, you know what I do is I look at industries where all the competitors are going the same direction and it happens to be away from the customer. And I was just like fascinated. I was like transfixed listening to him. It's like, and then I also tend to look for those industries that have low regulation. And I was like, okay, low regulation, but going away from the customer. And then it becomes an earnings per share game, right? He goes, those are the industries I target, and then I just chart a trajectory right back towards the customer. And I remember saying, but what about Virgin Airlines? Because Virgin, that's a pretty regulated industry to be in the airline business. And he said, not actually. He says, the difficulty comes when you end up, it's not the regulation there that is really that moniker of regulation, it's the unions. He says, so you have to get out of that business as soon as the unions take over. But until the unions take over, you can actually be very successful in serving the customer. So the hierarchy for him was always, how do you serve better the customer? And I always believed that exactly too. And then I thought to myself, okay, how could I do something like that? Because I had a lot of ideas. How can you multiply yourself in your activities? And so I thought, well, maybe I could target those industries that are heavily regulated. And so what are those heavily regulated industries? Healthcare, finance, right? And in particular, within healthcare, you've definitely got pharmaceuticals, et cetera, right? And then the third industry that's heavily regulated is energy. And we are in all of those sectors now.
Interesting.
Healthcare, finance, energy, they're very highly regulated, but we bring new ideas and we tend to focus on industries where the customer is sort of being left behind and the focus is on earnings per share. So, and that's what happens with companies over time, especially when they're publicly traded. They start to focus more on the shareholder, inevitably, because that's the pressure, then focus on the customer. And that makes way for an entrepreneur to come in with something that serves the customer in a unique way.
Right. So for the Internet Marketing Association, to our members watching, think about that. If the customer is being vacated in the customer journey, then that's an opportunity for you to diversify your business and to go capture market share. So that was really great insight by Sir Richard Branson. Virgin is a big supporter of the IMA. They're on our board of directors, James Birmingham, who's the CEO of Virgin Hotels. And next Thursday, we're hosting the CEO of Virgin Galactic, who's moved his company, Michael, here to Orange County. We're very much looking forward to speaking with him. And it's that sort of diversity that Richard's doing at Virgin that it seems to be that you're doing here. Robert, you've also told me a little bit about your global travels to Egypt and some amazing experiences you've had there. Do you mind unpacking that a little bit for our audience? Because I think that's also a fascinating chapter in your life.
I think all of us, we have this day job that we do, right? But that doesn't mean we have to let go of our passions or to get rid of hobbies and stuff like that, because it's like, I'm just all about work. I think the world is changing a lot in this regard. And for me, one of those passions was Egyptology. I've always been fascinated by it. And I went there in 2017 and I just fell in love with the place. I don't know what it is, but it was like, I don't know, maybe I had delusions of being like an Indiana Jones character or something like that. And I went back again by myself in 2018 and started making some discoveries and stuff that people hadn't seen before, and connected that also to some artwork and a historical reference point where Leonardo da Vinci actually spent 3 years in Egypt from 1482 until 1486 approximately. And these are the missing years in Italy, because people don't know where he went during that time frame. And actually, I found evidence that he actually went to Egypt. So I started tracking this down, and there's a whole story behind it and everything. And then it became a TV show. So it's like all of a sudden now it's become this TV show. It's on Amazon Prime. It's also on Gaia. It's done really remarkably well.
And what's it called?
It's called Code X.
Code X.
C-O-D-E
And that's on Egyptology.
X. Okay. Yeah, it's on Egyptology, but it's also this connection to Da Vinci and all these Rosicrucian scholars and polymaths from like the 15th century, the 16th century, that left encrypted messages that all relate back to the mystery schools of Egypt. It's just a fascinating story. And it was so fun for me because it's like adventure travel.
Right.
And so I've now been all over the world doing this. I've been to Mexico, to ancient sites in Mexico, to Peru, obviously Egypt several times. I'm going back again in a few months. So I'm just loving this side of my life.
And Egypt, when I think of Egypt, I think of the pyramids by default. It sort of is their symbol and touristic, symbol and what people realize it as. Now you have actually been through the pyramids and to what depth?
I've spent 11 nights in the pyramid.
You
in the
slept
Great Pyramid.
Overnight?
I have. Although I don't sleep much, to be honest.
Right.
I've spent the night in there,
Okay.
but I'm like studying the place like crazy, right? And made several new discoveries now, and worked with several Egyptologists as well, and working on a book in that regard as well. But a lot of it has gone into this TV show. We're also making a film about it, so it'll be a full feature film. And it's just been a hobby that's turned into something way bigger than I ever thought.
And something about you that our audience probably doesn't know, I don't know if many people know, but you're a mathematician as well. Can you tell us a little bit of math? My father was a math teacher, and I grew up in math. And I really believe the fundamentals of ones and zeros and all the code that we do and the mathematic value, algebra, all the different value foundation points have led to a different perspective that I've had as an entrepreneur. Can you talk a little bit about your mathematician strengths, Egyptology, and how that gives you perspective on all the work that you do?
Well, actually, that's a very good question. When you look at Egypt, what are we left with? You look at the Great Pyramid, you look at Khafre Pyramid, which is the second pyramid on the Giza Plateau, the middle pyramid, and then the smaller one, Menkaure. The three pyramids don't have any writing. Right? There's not much writing, although we did discover a few things here and there, but not much. So there's nothing really to tell us a story. But actually the builders left us a lot of their knowledge in living stone. Because that stone, the structure of it, the architecture of it, which is so confounding to all of us, how in the heck did the Egyptians do this 4,500 years ago, possibly even much longer ago than that? How do they do it? And how do they do it with such incredible perfection? And the analysis that I bring that was different than what the other Egyptologists would bring to this, and first it was a hobby that's now turned into something way bigger, is the mathematical perspective. To see what the messages were left behind, what level of knowledge they had related to pi, phi, Euler, all these major mathematical constants, which we've now found as being intrinsic to the structures themselves. What is the Giza plan? Was there an architect that planned the whole thing at once? Or was it really, as the dynastic story goes, which was a guy who wanted to have his tomb be inside the Great Pyramid, and then his son, and then his grandson, the other two pyramids? Well, the problem is no one's ever found any mummies, right, inside the Great Pyramid or the other two pyramids. So it kind of is difficult for people to wrap their brains around that no one's ever found that in there. There's no writing on the walls. And there's so many other places where you will find mummies and such, predominantly is going to be in either Saqqara or down in Valley of the Kings, right? You'll find these very majestic, grandiose like places that were intended to be tombs. But the Great Pyramid has this incredibly enigmatic mystery associated with it. What was its purpose? And so I try to interpolate that through the mathematics of the structure.
That's fascinating. And it seems like with your latest project, there's a lot of synergy around math, Egyptology, and we'll get to that project in just a few minutes. I really think you're doing a great thing for Egypt, because there have been a lot of my friends and other executives and CEOs that have actually been on this journey with you and actually stayed at the pyramids. I'm slightly envious. I think I'll get invited to one of these trips
You will,
soon.
definitely.
And it's fascinating because it's those sort of journeys, but what's also compelling is what you said. A lot of people would look at Robert Grant and say, wow, he's running this conglomerate of businesses, this startup, this other successful business, and he's got a family and he's got all these things going on, but he makes time to do the things that give him passion.
Yeah.
What sort of advice do you have for our entrepreneurs? Because so many of us are in the tech industry and it seems like time just goes right to the keyboard, or it goes to a client, or it goes to something work related. How are you able to time manage that time for yourself and to really decouple yourself from the daily grind?
First of all, I think that if you do the things you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And what I think all of us fall into this temptation of being is we tend to believe that we have to sort of work and suffer, right? There is this sort of mentality we carry with us very often. And I have sort of rejected that wholeheartedly, right? I've taken the things that I thought in the past would have no value to other people that I tend to love to do, and I found a way to weave these into my daily activities so that it becomes a seamless and integrated action, rather than being like, oh, this is this Robert for this activity, and then I have to be a different one, like I've got action figures where I'm wearing different outfits, right? This is the G.I. Joe version, this is the Indiana Jones version, this is the businessman wearing the blue suit version. And I said, no, I'm gonna sort of refuse that. Instead, try to find myself as an integrated whole person and accept all the different dimensions of myself. And we all have that, right? I tend to believe that the things that we judge in the world around us are the things that we will continue to attract. So if we judge something we don't like, we're going to continue to see that world, because it's the old adage of like a hammer seeks out the nail. Right? A hammer finds the nail, no matter what it is.
Sure.
It looks like a nail. I'm going to use that as a nail.
Right.
And we need to try to break out of that sort of monopolar or mono sort of thinking, which is very much what we're facing right now as a society, if you think about it.
Right.
Because we all tend to think, oh, we're right.
Right.
I'm right. Look, I have all these likes on my social media. Everyone thinks I'm right. Well, I didn't maybe even realize that was sort of a bit of a manipulation to get me to stay longer on the platform, because then I got more dopamine. It's like a whole new business of drug dealing.
Right.
But we're the ones who are creating our own dopamine, so it's really smooth, right?
Sure.
It's genius, in fact.
We'll get into that in a second, but I do really love the fact of what you said of wearing those different action figures. And I struggled with that in my career, because I was jumping from IMA to KCOM and to IEC, and then another company I was on the board, and I realized there is a way to really bring it all center. And now with so much going on in my life, I actually have so much time. And I think once you've been able to change that mindset, then scale is infinite. You're running a $250 million fund and you have all these businesses, and the scale potential is incredible. If your investors and your stakeholders and your partners, if they viewed you as someone who was flustered and scattered and rushing, I think the confidence level of your community and stakeholders would depreciate. And it's something that I'd love my audience to really hone in on. There is a way to escape that suffocation, because I suffered it for 2 decades of my career. And there is a mindset, if you can shift that and create a lane where everything that you do follows that lane, and you do something that you absolutely love. I have a passion for what I do, then the results are endless. I mean, the monetary results are like the bonus, right? Because if you're doing everything in your day based on pleasure, then what greater career can you have? So if you're debating that in your head and you need some advice, reach out to the IMA. I'll talk to you. I'll help you. I'll figure out a way to kind of get that narrow lane. And there is a way to get out of that struggle because you don't have to fight a war every day in your career. Now, going back to some of the items that you talked around mathematics, Egypt, your businesses, your entrepreneurship, your cultural heritage, I really believe that people that I've interviewed on the Impact Show, we're nearing our 50th episode, have all been people that have wrapped everything around a delivery of their life's greatest work for a project that has given birth on my show.
The magnum opus.
The magnum
great
opus.
Work.
That's been stored and you just wanted to open it. And I'm so honored to share your latest project with our audience and the greater world. You've been working on this project called Cyber, and what you've been able to do with an intraocular lens and camera technology. Can you share with our audience your latest venture and what you've been up to in your lab?
Absolutely. Well, given my background in optics and working in companies like Bausch & Lomb and Coherent, in 2013 and 14, I started filing patents on an intraocular lens that could do all the things that your iPhone does. Or your Android phone. And what is an intraocular lens? So have you ever known anyone that's had to get cataract surgery?
Yes.
Okay.
Mom, yeah.
Your mom had cataract surgery.
Yes.
Okay. So how long did it take to do the surgery?
It was a very quick process from what I recall.
Yeah, it's usually less than the actual operative time is less than 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's what she said.
And it's the most commonly performed surgical procedure in the world. Over 30 million procedures already performed every year.
Wow.
So when I started to realize, and I've always kind of been good at predicting trends and what's going to happen next, and so when I started to realize that there was likely to be contact lenses that would be able to do this, as well as glasses and everything, and now we're seeing this year with Apple coming out with eyeglass and so many other technologies coming out on the heels of that, Mojo Vision coming out with their contact lens technology, realizing also with the background I had, both in tech and in the healthcare space, that people have a hard time tolerating contact lenses. I love the contact lens projects, but there are scleral contact lenses, and some people just don't like to wear contact lenses. Over 6 million people every year fall off of contact lenses. And so then they go to alternative approaches, back to glasses or maybe LASIK or whatever. So then I thought, well, another challenge is, how do you have that number of SKUs?
Right.
Stock keeping units, right? So you've got different sizes for the contact lenses and everything. Is there a way to have it all be on one lens and you only have to put it in once and it's completely painless? Then that also means, though, how do I make sure it doesn't get hacked?
Okay.
Right? So then it sort of sidetracked me into, okay, I've got to create a whole new blockchain technology, right, that allows you to completely encrypt all of your data with uncrackable encryption that is quantum resistant also. So I went and did a sort of side rail business, and that's called Crown Sterling. But then once I felt that that could be strong enough, and then all the other technologies started to converge, then we could actually come to something like this, which is this really, really cool technology. It's so small, in fact, I can barely see it. There we go. Okay, so here it is. You see that?
Okay.
That little lens inside there, it's 6 millimeters.
So for our audience, this looks like a contact lens.
But it's much smaller.
And
it's much tinier.
Rob, what's inside that?
There's a little black dot.
That black dot is?
A camera.
A camera. Mm-hmm. A camera.
It's a 300 micron diameter camera. So it's 1/3 of 1 millimeter diameter. And it's a 160,000 megapixel, 30 frames per second camera. Okay. It can capture all of your life's experience. It can capture all your memories.
Okay.
This lens acts just like it acts in similar ways to like an Apple Play.
Okay.
So you know how you can cast whatever's on your iPhone up to a screen. Mm-hmm. There's no actual computer inside this. Not even a battery either. What it has is a liquid crystal lens display, right? So for AR and VR technology, it has a camera as well. And then you can use it for a number of things. First of all, we use it through induction, so a little piece of tape that goes on top of your eye, on your eyelid, that captures energy, harvests it, right? It keeps a capacitance as well, and then sends the energy at a sub-threshold level into your eye to power this lens.
Whoa.
So the way to turn it off is you just take the tape off your eyelid. And you could put makeup over this eye.
So when I'm blinking, that's creating an energy source, an induction energy source that's creating the power to the camera.
Correct. Not only the camera, but also to what you're seeing on your heads-up display and everything else.
So there's a heads-up display here.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
There's a full heads-up display. So we're all getting used to this now. Driving cars, I just got a new car and I've got this heads-up display on my windshield.
Sure.
But now you're going to have it also inside your eye.
So when this activates, it's when you put the tape here.
That's right. You put the tape right on the eyelid, and it's small. It's like that big.
Okay.
And there's a little Bluetooth inside there as well.
Wow.
Right. And so the Bluetooth just rides on the back of the induction of the electricity into it as well. So it doesn't even have to have a separate Bluetooth.
Fascinating.
So you've got a lens that looks just like this, which is very simple, right? With some very, very basic circuitry design that goes into it, but super simple, and a liquid crystal display that will allow people to be able to experience AR and VR technologies that go along with that. And we're building a very cool Cyberverse along with it as well.
So before we get to Cyberverse, tell us the application. Is this for end user consumer? Is it for medical? Who is this going to in its first round?
Well, the first round of this, actually, we see a huge benefit for age-related macular degeneration patients. We believe that. And so we want to pursue an indication from the FDA to be able to treat patients who are suffering from profound blindness after they've been through a round, the full 2-year round of Lucentis treatments.
Right.
So basically, you would use the camera to capture an image. And patients that suffer from age-related macular degeneration, they lose their central vision. It's like as if there's a big black dot over the center of their vision.
Wow.
And so that's why people that suffer from this have to kind of look at you from the side of their eye because they can't look at you straight on.
Correct.
So what this does is it redirects the image that the camera captures to wherever we want in the periphery, so that the consumer or patient will be able to see what was in the center of their vision, but in the periphery of their vision. And we'll be able to do this through, we believe, we're applying to the FDA for what's called an investigational device exemption. And that's going to be one of the first indications. We believe also there's going to be indications for this relative to glaucoma as well, which has the opposite effect.
So you have a medical application, but eventually this could become a mainstream product where you get like the cataract surgery, 5-10 minute process. The intraocular lens gets implanted in the subject. Now that content that's being recorded, does that go in the blockchain, you said? Is that how it gets
so you
transmitted?
could capture your content, whatever you want to record, right, while you've got that piece of tape on your eye, or however you would like to record it, and you can drive it. It becomes a slave effectively to your iPhone or your iWatch, right? Or Android or whatever else, right? And so it's just like a casting up to your eye for this. And what's really cool about this is that everything eventually that you can do on your iPhone or your iPad or your computer, you'll be able to do with this lens.
It's fascinating. This is a new medium. As you know, Palmer Luckey, who's a very good friend of mine, was one of our first interviewers. He developed Oculus. He didn't develop virtual reality, but he developed the mainstream version of this platform that eventually became the mainstream, intergalactic virtual reality world. And as you know, Mark Zuckerberg, who bought Oculus in his time, is now rebranded Facebook as Meta. Meta has its metaverse, and it sounds to me like your vision is to create the Cyberverse. Cyberverse being a alternative to metaverse, where you have this alternate platform in which would there be games and sort of alternate worlds that you can go into through your cyber.
Yeah, and so the cyber lens actually has a name. It's kind of an interesting name. It's Third Eye.
Third Eye.
Right? So we call this Third Eye lens.
Okay.
Cyberverse is sort of the metaverse world that can be used on Third Eye lens, right? Once it gains its FDA approvals, et cetera. And we intend to be able to have it be used by any consumer.
I love it.
And every time I posted anything on this, as just even a concept on my social media, I get like 20,000 likes. And of course, a lot of people are like, wait, but how do I ensure that I'm not going to get hacked? You know, what I see isn't going to get hacked. And, you know, that's why we took a lot of effort. I'm big on personal data sovereignty.
Of course.
Like very, very big. And I believe that data is going to be the most valuable asset that each of us have access to. And right now we need to start taking the steps to safeguard our data so that we can pursue life, liberty, and happiness in the future. Because This is going to become a huge, even much bigger issue than what we've seen in the last few years with elections and all the stuff going on. We need to become very, very wise to this. And that's a whole nother effort that we're undertaking. But I can say to you unequivocally that I feel very good now that it's possible to be able to encrypt all of your own data and make sure that nobody gets access to it.
I really wish something like this existed from the birth of my first child. Today was our kid's first day of school, and
Mine
everything was about, what it's like. You're dropping them off,
Yep.
and it's a moment that you'll never have again. Waking them up saying, today's your first day of first grade, today's your first day of fourth grade, taking them to school. There's so many moments and memories that give me chills just thinking about it, because that's what you live your life for. And to miss those moments because you got to get your camera out, you got to get everyone posed. But you're telling me that, if I have cyber third eye, I can just capture that entire moment and not have to worry about taking my phone out. It's all being captured. I really believe that the impossible is possible, because when Palmer started Oculus, it may have just been this complete bizarre concept, and now virtual reality has become mainstream. So many of my clients and the business applications of this are endless. And then the metaverse was brought into this new medium. And this reminds me very much of that, and I really believe that not only is this possible, it's going to become an economy. This is not just a business, this is an industry you're creating.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about privacy and how you can safeguard that in blockchain. I mean, blockchain is a secure platform, so much so that our banking is all moving there, and I really believe that that is your best backbone for encryption. And I mean, I think people are more concerned about their money being hacked than maybe, if they're putting this, induction tape on their eye, then they know that they're recording. They know that whatever data that they're looking at.
And that was part of the reason why
we
wanted it that way,
right.
so that people
I
can
like
know.
That. And I would know if you have the third eye on.
Right.
Okay. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and that was, and also that there's an easy cut switch too, right?
Right.
So you just take the tape off. It has no battery, so
That's
it
fantastic.
can't run, and it's not a computer in there.
Right.
It's just like a monitor that you're basically casting something to right now when you use your iPhone, to cast some program that you're watching.
So privacy is at the root.
So
of this.
privacy is at its core, and it's not just about blockchain, because not all encryptions on blockchains are created equally. So we now have quantum computers. And quantum computers have come along with a major risk, because you can crack, using a quantum computer, what were the encryptions that banks use, that everybody used, and also blockchains currently use. And so what we had to do is develop a new way to take the world's strongest encryption and apply it to blockchain. And the world's strongest encryption that's used on nuclear codes is called one-time pad. So one-time pad encryption means that every character is individually encrypted. And we found a way to make that efficient and practical when used with blockchain. And that's what's super exciting about this, because now that delivers some form of data sovereignty for the individual, which is critically important. But another thing that I just got another patent issued last week on this, is that this technology also includes that if you have determined that you do not want to be recorded on camera, have you noticed that if you try to take a screenshot now on Apple Plus, it'll black out the section in your screenshot. You won't be able to see the film or whatever if it's one of their copyrighted protected films. This is going to do the exact same thing. For people that want to be blacked out, they just have to put their settings on that in their profile on their regular iPhones or whatever, their watches, etc. And they will then be blocked out. They will not be able to be recorded by this technology. We just patented that technology just last week, just got issued.
That's awesome. And tell me one more time about Cyberverse. What's your vision with Cyberverse, and what are some of the things that I'll be able to do in the Cyberverse?
Well, I think one of the biggest unmet needs in the gaming architecture of the industry right now is this idea of that the world today is really, rapidly evolving towards, which is this expansion of consciousness. And I've, become very active in that way of looking at the world. And I think it started with yoga and mindfulness living and sort of just looking differently at what is consciousness and how can I be more thoughtful and aware. Well, what this Cyberverse is intended to do is it's intended to be a world that starts off with an augmented reality. We're going to first launch it with glasses.
Okay.
Right?
Oh.
And the glasses will have full heads-up display and everything. And so you can think of it as you're starting to experience a world around you that then starts to have other aspects that maybe other people can't see unless they also have the glasses. You could even create things in that world. I could create a digital sculpture on my desk, go on a business trip, and while I'm gone, no one can see it except for the people that I allow to see it, and they'll walk in my office and they'll see the digital sculpture. So it's this sort of this augmented reality context. But the intention of this is to teach people sort of this increased spiritual, and I specifically I'm not using the term religious, right? This is a spiritual expansion of consciousness game, right? That's intended to teach you how to become more self-aware. Wow. So we've tapped into a lot of work related to Jungian psychology, right? Taken the hero's journey as well from Joseph Campbell, and we've applied this to the context of this augmented reality game in preparation for people being able to get a cyber lens and then enter into an entirely different world, which is like, let's say, a metaphysical but digital world.
Wow.
Right? So you could think of images, it's all of our own original artwork and everything. You could think of the images that you probably remember from Myst and Riven and all these types of gaming architectures. And that's what we're tapping into, but it's all about improving your awareness and consciousness of the self, of yourself, in the real world too.
I love it. And that all ties into you and the essence of you and growing up in our whole interview here. Are you going to make Cyberverse open source, or are you going to close source it on your own games and your own world?
It's going to be open source. We want people to be able to develop on top of this as well. We definitely want it to be an open architecture.
Good.
We want our cryptographic protocols and everything to be entirely adhering to what's called the Kirchhoff principle. So that means anyone could read it and they still can't crack it, right? And the beauty of what we've built is we've put all of this transparency in mind into the architecture of all that we do, but also focused it on everything returning back to your data sovereignty, because you should own who you are.
And so as we wrap up this interview, I get spatial disorientation when I go into virtual reality. And it's a great platform, but it's not for me. Glasses, I can definitely do. Interocular lens, that's something I can definitely do. It's just really interesting because as much as I think virtual reality is a gateway into the metaverse, I think it's going to negate a huge marketplace because of the spatial disorientation and the potential anxieties that just come with completely covering your face with a third, dimension and what that comes into. I think that moderation and use makes sense. Our kids use it in school. I use it once in a while to fly over Paris. There's this game where I'm an eagle. It feels great to just escape and do that. But I can only do it in short hits.
Oh, I did it on El Capitan.
Right.
I did the El Capitan module on Oculus Rift, and I was like, whoa.
Right. So I don't really know where it's all going to go for Metaverse, and it's just very interesting because this to me I think has the appetite of a mainstream appeal. And I want to just summarize a couple things because we have so many young entrepreneurs that are watching this show, and it's very important to also understand the use and the knowledge around patents. And it seems to be at the core of who you are as an entrepreneur. Can you just give 30 seconds on why patents are so important? Obviously, it's to protect your ideas, but when does a patent make sense and when doesn't for our audience and their understanding?
It's a great question. I think it's one that a lot of people don't understand. People think that my patents are stronger than yours, so I'm going to battle against your patents. That's not how it works. I mean, you might have patents that cover your technology, but it doesn't mean that you can operate your technology freely, right? You have to have a freedom to operate within your field so that you don't also infringe other people's patents. So with that in mind, what you need to recognize is that just because you have a great idea, if you don't go ahead and patent that idea, someone else could patent that idea and then block you from using your own idea.
Wow.
And that's what happens.
Right.
So, one of the things that I really liked about what, Elon Musk's perspective is, right, on this, he's like, to all the other car companies, you can use all of our stuff, right? Nobody really did. They tried to go around it because it's like, there's also a bit of an ego aspect, not invented here mentality. I'm not going to use Elon Musk patents. I sat next to an executive in first class on a plane probably 10 years ago, right after I bought my first Tesla. And I said, what are you going to do about this? And he's like, oh, it's a flash in the pan. It's going to be gone. It's like, I don't think so. I mean, luckily Ford's still done pretty well, right? They've done quite well, but so many other companies have finally just gotten to the stage through that sort of Clay Christensen model, right, of disruptive innovation,
right,
which is sort of like, I'm going to mock and deride, I'm going to laugh at it, right? And then finally I'm going to get to the stage of, oh yeah, I declare it as self-evident, it was my idea, right? And I think that's what's happening right now in the industry, but I think everybody knows the truth, that there was fantastic innovation that happened at Tesla. And I think the patent aspect of this is so important, and it should, just like we're talking about integrating all the aspects of your life, integrating the patent effort into what you do, I think is a critically important point also. So instead of thinking of it as an afterthought, oh, I had this idea, I'm going to go ahead and file a patent on it. Now it's fully integrated into all of our activities. So I've been filing tons and tons of patents very recently.
Absolutely. And if you look at like a company like Microsoft, who's a great partner of the IMA, you know, their sustainable over the decades has really been ridden on a lot of their patents. Even Apple pays them so much revenue just based on how many patents that Microsoft has created. So think about that for your business or service. And as we wrap up, Rob, what I like to do is ask my guests, you know, think back to some of the greatest challenges you've ever had and the adversity that came with some of these impossible circumstances that you've gone through your life, either personally or professionally. You're at that moment where your life's greatest work is blossoming. Tell us a little bit how you overcame those challenges, and when you got into those dark moments where you felt the world was against you, how did you get through that time to really like crack through that adversity?
Realizing that I was the obstacle. You know, I think the only obstacles that are real are the ones we allow ourselves to believe. And whatever we believe will happen actually has a big impact. You know, it determines in quantum physics Schrodinger's cat. Is it alive or dead? Or is it, you know, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, if you study quantum physics? I think there's so much more power to this concept. If you believe you're gonna, it's like if you think you can or you think you can't, you'll be right. And I think what we tend to all suffer from is we all believe that we have to go through a certain amount of suffering and difficulty to get the things we want to get. Otherwise it wasn't, you know, it's like I didn't suffer enough. I didn't have enough difficulty. It wasn't satisfying enough when I finally overcame. But if you really look at the difference between greatness and having some skill, and I don't mean to like cap on Christina Aguilera, but I probably will. But so I don't know if you remember, probably 10 years ago or so, Christina was singing at the Super Bowl, and she sang the national anthem. Right? And she went through, because she's been trained in music her whole life and everything, she went through all the details, all the scats and all the, you know, lifts and whatever you call that. And it was painful to watch. It was labored. It was very painful, but she was showing, she wanted to show everybody all the training that she had this incredible range of voice. You contrast that with Jennifer Hudson, who sang at another, you know, Super Bowl. I think it was like 2 years later. And she gets up there and listening to her was just like butter. I mean, she made it look so easy. And you listen to it, you're like, wow. And that is genius and greatness. And real personification of talent. The other is just skill. Transcending skill is all a mental exercise.
That's fascinating.
And when we think we can, we do.
And it goes back down to that book, you know, if you think you can. I read it to my 2-year-old son, and you know, it really starts at that fundamental. Perception is reality, and I couldn't agree more. I think the mindset and the mind is probably the most powerful organ in our body, because it could really take you down a never-ending rabbit hole, or it could present you the greatest, richest life, and it has absolutely nothing to do with financial resources. It's just where you put your mind, and I couldn't agree more. Last question, since we have so many entrepreneurs watching this, what advice do you give to that young up-and-coming startup that's facing challenges, or someone who's trying to break away, or someone who's just unsatisfied in their work environment, trying to reinvent themselves? What sort of advice do you have to our audience?
You're going to laugh at this, but for the young one who's really starting out, go and fail fast, and fake it till you make it, right? Just get into the process of doing it. You'll learn the ropes on the way. Nobody knows it when they start it. It's like none of us can find our ass with both hands when we first start. That's the truth of it, right?
Yeah.
So don't be afraid of it. Don't get paralyzed by your left brain, who is basically telling you, no, with all this rational thought, it's impossible, it's impossible. You will manifest that outcome.
Yeah.
In contrast, if you go into it and just say, you know what, I'm not afraid of failure, the chances that you will increase in success are dramatically higher. You know, it's pretty funny. One of the things you can look at is that fear makes us stupid. It literally makes us stupid. People that freeze when they're taking standard tests, right, out of fear, they don't perform as well. It's a simple calculus. This is not, this is not quantum physics or like linear algebra, okay? This is easy to understand. When you're in a place of confidence, accepting of yourself, accepting of the people around you, and just go about doing your own thing without worrying about what the heck anybody else thinks, you can sing.
What a great way to end it. Robert Grant, thank you so much for this epic interview. Probably one of my best in my career. Wow. We got a lot there that we unpacked. I know that you're going to learn so much from this interview. And if you want to get in touch with Robert Grant or any of his companies, feel free to follow the information below. I look forward to seeing you at Impact 22 happening in just a few weeks in Deer Valley, Utah. We're going to release this interview right before then. Very excited to share your knowledge, your wisdom, your advice, Egyptology, math, cyber. I mean, we're having a blast over here, and I'm so stoked that you did this interview with me. And thank you again, Robert. And thank you to our audience for watching. We'll be back at you soon.
Thank you.
Sinan Kanatsiz coming to you from the Eiffel Tower in Paris. I just wanted to share with you an epic location, tallest building in France. And I'm here to invite you to Impact 22. We only do epic things, and I can't wait till you see the content lanes that we've produced this year. And enjoy an awesome gourmet dinner with me on October 7th. My entire network's gonna be there. I can't wait to see you. Live from the Eiffel Tower.